My question is about non-duality and mental illness. Someone suggested to me that I might have borderline personality disorder. Looking it up online, it does fit in with my behaviours and moods. Dramatic mood swings, risk-taking and addictive behaviour, and how I am in relationship. Everything is black and white, perfect or ruined. I had convinced myself these mood swings are constructive and being free, like flip-flopping. I don't like the label, though, of BPD. Question is, does waking up sometimes look like madness, or am I just more messed up in my head than I like to think? By the way, I'm not home yet. We'll watch when I get back. Thanks for the stream. I think that when you begin to get into this subject, like often people begin to get into this subject because they just have there's different reasons. There can be that you just have a spontaneous awakening. There can be that you're more susceptible and open, and you've not had so many ideas about who you are, so there's just an openness to it. But a lot of people come to it through suffering. And I personally don't believe in all the labels of mental illness. I think they're labels that help us evolve with our thoughts about things, but I don't think they're fixed things. Like from my experience of mental illness and knowing a close relative with mental health problems, throughout the years, they've had so many diagnoses because they change diagnosis and they divide them up and they create more. And so basically, when you come to this subject, it's more than likely that you've had a good period of years of having very bad thinking. And the very bad thinking is going to affect the chemicals in your brain. Now, whether the very bad thinking started because of the chemicals in the brain or because of the bad thinking, who knows? It's like, I just don't know how this world is created. It's really mysterious. Yeah, like it's so it's so mysterious how it's created. Like it's one big brain in a way. You could say we're walking through a brain. So if you've got a brain that's extreme, that has lots of extreme mood swings, then the world is going to be really extreme. So you experience the drug taking, the risking. But I don't think it really matters when we're talking to put labels on it. But when you go for a diagnosis or when you work with a therapist, you shouldn't ever be arrogant. You should work in their diagnosis and their titles. And I don't mean to dismiss it in any way, because I also think that psychiatrists and therapists can be super helpful to people in certain situations. But here in non-duality, from my perspective, it's not like it's not so strict, and everything's relative. Like if you're going for a diagnosis, then it's really helpful because you get told you've got personality disorder and then you can research it. But then eventually you come to see that who knows what we are. But don't jump ahead of yourself. I always have a feeling with you, Sam, that like with your addiction, that you really need to work on your psychology. And like I've suggested, like going to a psychologist and like learning more about your personality structure, because at the moment I see you caught in these extremes of your personality structure and then really believing the thoughts when you're in that extreme. So when anger comes up, you really believe the anger and your mind really goes for it, sadness and goes for it. When the idea of drugs come up, there's a real believing in it, and then you go for it. So my recommendation to you would be to find out as much as you can about psychology, and really like dedicate your heart to it and to discovering more about your personality structure. Because the more you discover, it will stop you going into them extreme thinking or feeling patterns, and it will help it come down. And as it helps it come down, as it helps it be less like dragged into time and agony and thoughts and thinking and stories, as it gets smaller and smaller, that part, then there can be a hearing of non-duality. Sometimes everyone mixes things up or tries to skip ahead of itself. Like this teaching isn't fact. Anyone that teaches non-duality or teaches self-help or teaches working on the personal self or anything, even therapy, it's not like a fixed thing. It's all dependent on who you're speaking to and the stage they're at their life. Like there comes a point where you let therapy go, or there comes a point where you let the story go. But everyone wants to get ahead of themselves. They're like, I want to be at the finish line. I want to be nobody. I'm nobody. I'm nobody. I'm nobody. I'm nobody. I'm nobody. I'm nobody. Fuck you. I'm nobody. And they're in absolute hell, and they're still screaming they're nobody. There's nobody here. There is nobody effing here. Who do you think you are? Don't you know there's nobody here? There is nobody. There's nothing doing. There's nobody. And they're obviously deeply suffering, but they still want to be at the end because it's like a personality dynamic. I'm sure in school they were like, pick me, pick me, pick me, pick me first as well. Like it's like a dynamic, like they maybe got rewarded by their parents a lot for being successful, or who knows. And you just got to take life like everything, not just this subject, but like everything. It's like one step at a time. Like when you have to do big jobs, like clean the basement and the basement's a mess. If you start thinking of it as a whole and the finish point, you're never going to clean that basement. You just got to slowly, bit by bit, work through it. Bit by bit. At the moment, I'm writing this gigantic book, and I was listening to somebody speak the other day, and they were saying, you just have to take one word at a time. And I really liked that because that's the way I do it. Like when I do books, I break it all down. So it's just tiny sections I'm doing, and then you build something a lot bigger. And it's the same with non-duality. Like you just take it bit by bit. Like saying there is nobody is only relevant in certain circumstances. You know, if your personality is really unbalanced and having a lot of suffering, you gotta work on the brimming personality. I could say that a million times. And working on the personality requires the appearance of doership, that you do something. Just like cleaning the basement, you gotta say to yourself, come on, Lisa, you gotta get up and do the basement. So it appears like you're doing. It doesn't require, so working on the personality, you can't be like, there is nobody, all there is everything, all there is consciousness. Every time a feeling comes up, you've got to investigate the feeling, investigate where it comes from, make connections, see what your reactions are, pay attention. What am I doing when this feeling comes up? When I feel overwhelmed, I get into bed. I start getting angry. I start like compulsively thinking. Like you have to really break it down. What is that personality structure? I was so lucky with one of my teachers. Like I spent hours and hours, millions of hours, like years going through these thoughts and these illusions and these feelings, and like really giving myself space to have these feelings and really working on the personality structure. And some non-duality thoughts help you with the personality structure, but some of them are destructive. It depends where you are. Depends where you are on the pathless path. So eventually, when everything begins to break down and you see through all your bullshit and all your belief systems, as you're not so much clinging on to the idea, I'm right, she's right, he's right, or I am the best person in the universe, I am more intelligent, I have more this, I have more that, I have more that, my possessions. And as it begins to break down and everything's not seen as truth and fact, then it begins to be seen that this is a pathless path for nobody. Nobody's experiencing it. There's nobody been here. There's nobody here. There is simply life happening. This is this moment speaking. There isn't an identity speaking. There's only this speaking. Isn't that beautiful?